Hey everybody, what's up? Gary Simon here. So today we're going to take a layout that I created in my previous tutorial from last week where I showed you how to create a broken layout or an asymmetrical layout. And a lot of you requested me to take one of the variations I created and do the front-end development process, or in other words, HTML, CSS, and make it a mobile-first responsive project that works in the browser. So just to show you what I'm talking about, we did 3 different variations. You can see right here. And I put out a poll to see which one you guys wanted the most, and it turned out to be number 2. All right, so this is going to be the layout that I'm going to show you how I would tackle it. Now, of course, there's a lot of different ways to achieve the same thing when it comes to front-end development. So the actual product is right here. This is what we're going to create. All right, so starts off mobile first. And you can see we progressively enhance it. There's a few different breakpoints that I targeted as we keep going out. All right, so as always, make sure to subscribe and let's get started.
Before we begin, there's never been a better time to try Linode. From now until May 31st of 2020, Linode is giving every single account access to object storage for free. That's right. Whether you create an account all the way back in 2003 or even just today, you can take advantage of free object storage until April 30th of 2020. What is object storage, you might ask? Well, object storage is an easy way to store and access data without the need for running a server. It's perfect for data that doesn't regularly change, like images and other multimedia files, important backups, or giant archives for servers that might need more storage space. One of the best use cases for object storage is hosting your own static website. You can have a site up and highly available on Linode's object storage with as little as an HTML and CSS file. To give object storage a try for free and get an additional $20 on your new Linode account, sign up at linode.com/design course.
All right, everybody. So basically we have an almost empty folder. We have an index.html, as we can see right here. The only thing I've added here is just the link rel here to the main.css file. That happens to be inside of the CSS folder in the main Sass file. Obviously, it's completely blank. Also, I'm watching it with the Visual Studio Code Live Sass compiler. I'm also watching with a live server extension, the index.html over here. So every time we save it, it's going to update automatically. We'll be doing mobile first as well. By the way, you can get those 2 extensions by going to the extension section and Live Sass compiler you can see here and the live server. You'll want those 2 if you want to emulate my setup at least. So let's switch over to Adobe XD, and this is the design that most people wanted to see in terms of the front-end development process. And so at first glance, when it comes to a project like this or a layout like this, it's very blocky. There's a lot of crazy things happening. It's broken in a sense. It's easy to get, especially if you're new to this, a little bit worried about how you're going to tackle it. But really, it just takes some time to sit there and analyze, try to forecast your HTML elements that you're going to need in order to structure this thing, and also how you're going to, in a general sense, achieve it through the CSS properties as well. So for me, what I decided to do is I'm not even going to use the CSS grid. I'll use the flexbox in a couple small areas, but overall, I'm not going to use like the grid to structure the entire layout that you see here. So what I decided to do is we're going to have this top section up here, because as you can see, there's nothing crazy going on in the nav bar itself. We have a logo, we have a menu right here. Very simple. So we're just going to take the header HTML element, and then inside of that we'll have the logo, and then we'll have a nav element with an unordered list. Very simple up here. Nothing we have to be worried about in terms of crazy CSS. Then we have these social links over here, right? Now the way they're situated, being over this element, and also the pagination, I knew right off the bat we're just going to use CSS position absolute for both of these elements, and then this will be right 0, this will be left 0, or almost 0, as you get, there's some padding there. And so we can, in a sense, let me just duplicate this so I don't lose it. We can, in a sense, just completely get rid of these elements right here, because we can easily position them with CSS position absolute. So In terms of the HTML structure, it's not too important when you're thinking about where you're going to put those elements in the HTML, because they break outside of the normal box model in their CSS position absolute. Next up, so we can see we have a column up here, or a row up here for a header. We have this element right here. Now, this background element that we see, we can as well use a div, and then we'll use the CSS background property to get this in here. And then the CSS background property will also allow us to choose the background position so that we can really get the specific area. This is a large image. If you can see here, I mean, we can easily position that with CSS. And then just to make our life easier, we can make this CSS position absolute as well. So now we're starting to simplify the layout. And this element, you can see it's basically aligned to this paragraph right here. So what we can do is we can use the CSS pseudo selector of before or after in order to get this element here. So we don't really have to worry about that either. And then we have this element down here. So really we have 3 rows. We have one up here, another right here, and then another right here. And so this element, we could call it, just because it's at the bottom of the layout, we'll call it the footer, even though it's not really looking like a traditional footer. We'll just call it the footer. We'll use the footer tag, and we just make the alignment, or the width of it, maybe like 70% or so, as it is here. And then inside of it, we can easily position this stuff, and probably create 2 div tags for these. Very simple. You know, a lot of people were thinking, wow, how are you going to do this? It's actually really simple when you break it down in these terms. The same could be said for this iteration right here. I mean, this, where it says cosmetic. Again, that's CSS position absolute, and just, you know, aligning it back using your Z index to make sure it shows up behind your elements in front of this, the other various elements as well. I mean, so this stuff isn't that difficult when you just break each one of them down. The same thing can be said for here. I would use CSS position absolute for this section. Right here, we could make this structure all this with like a grid or flex box that would sit on top of this element right here naturally. This would be its own column right here for this type. So all in all, it's not as difficult as a lot of people make it out to be. So we'll just reference this as we go throughout here. So let's start the actual process of HTML. All right, so let's go over here. Okay, so let me get my reference code up here. I did create this beforehand, just because if I don't do that, then I know I'll be kind of bumbling around, and I kind of want this to be a little bit more smooth of a process. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to import fonts. So our fonts, here's the code up here. By the way, Codepen. Check out the YouTube description. That way you can just copy some of this stuff if you want to follow along. We have a font called Amiri, which is that serif font. It's kind of real elegant in 400 and 700 weight, and also Montserrat, of course. Those two work well together. Okay, so we have that. Let me go ahead and get our, there we go. Now we have our preview there. Oh, I don't know why I jumped into the CSS part. Yeah, duh, you have to do the HTML. I'm gonna hit Control B to get rid of that. All right, so the very first thing we're gonna do is we're going to have our position absolute elements. I'll have them at the top, okay? So we're gonna have a div class called main.bg. I'm gonna use Emmet abbreviations here, so period main.bg will give us that markup. So again, the main background, what that element is for, is going to be for this right here. All right. Next up after that, we're going to have UL social, and these are going to be our social links. All right. So image source equals images / youtube.svg. I have to get those in there real quick. So Shift, Alt, and down arrow key. Yeah, there was 4 of them. I'm going to go ahead and pause and get the images folder up here as well. All right, so there they are. Let me update this real quick. We have, actually what I'll do is just paste those off screen. Right here, we have Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I could probably change this too, just because I'm a little bit OCD about that. All right, there those are. We're also gonna have our ul.pagination or pagination, however you wanna reference that. li, this first one, well, let's just do this. We'll do li class equals active. All right, so this is gonna be in reference to this element right here in that section. And then also, okay, so those 3 are all gonna be position absolute. We can position those anywhere, doesn't matter. So now we're actually gonna get started with the header at the very top, and that's in reference to this section up here, all right? So very simple, we just have a header. Let's see here, header. And inside of our header, we're going to have, let's see, we will have a logo. This isn't gonna go anywhere. Cosmetica. After that, we're gonna have a nav. And inside of the nav, we're gonna have an image. This is gonna go images menu.svg, just for the hamburger menu. This is also gonna have a class of menu. And then also an unordered list for our main navigation. And this goes nowhere, and this one will say home. And then everything else remains pretty much the same. We have products, FAQ, and then we have my cart and a span element, which has like how many items are in the cart. Why do we have 2 closing span tags? There we go. And of course, that part is in reference to this little 5 right here. All right. And so that's it for that part. Now you can see, because we don't have these elements, these 3 elements right here as position absolute, they're pushing the navigation down, of course. But once we make those position absolute, you know, this will float right back to the top. All right, so now what we'll have is, there's actually not much more CSS. Now what we need is, let's see here. I'm going to have a div with a class of main content. Oops. And inside of main content is where we're going to have our h1. So in reference to this right here, these 2 elements. That's all we need to put. So we're going to put h1. We'll put in you're a cosmetic, and then strong superstar. That'll make it bold. And then paragraph, whatever that type was that we had in the thing right there. That's good. That's it. Next up, we're just going to create the HTML. Oops, wrong one. We're going to create the HTML. I was showing you my Discord server there. For this, I mean, very simple. All right, so we're going to have our footer. In our footer, we'll have, we'll just use a div class called makeup for the photograph that's in there. This thing right here. And then we'll have a class of CTA for call to action. And this will just be browse beauty, whatever. And then we'll have a div class 1, no, block. It'll also have 1. Shift Alt down, and this will be 2. So these 2 blocks are, or these div elements are in reference to these 2 elements right here, which we'll position with CSS position absolute, but we'll make sure that this whole container right here, which is the footer element, will be position relative. So any elements that are position absolute inside of a relative container means that if you use top 0 or right 0 or whatever like that, it'll position inside of only this container, not, you know, the entire viewport. All right, so now that's it. That is all the HTML that we need for this. So of course, we're quite far away from, you know, a finished product because we have no CSS yet. So what we want to do now is mobile first CSS. And the problem with that is though, is I only created a desktop version that looks like this, right? So ideally, you'd have a UI designer do, you know, the mobile version of what it looks like on a small phone, and then a tablet, large tablet, etc. We don't have that. So what I did when I first created the code for this project, like the CSS, is I basically just used my knowledge of UI design to kind of design it with CSS for the mobile first as I went on. And it worked out pretty well, actually. And it's just a very simplified, a more simplified version of this. It's just scrunched in a little bit. As long as you adhere to good UI design fundamentals, you'll be golden. All right, so here's what I did. All right, so now for the CSS. All right, body, I always just get rid of the default margin, so margin 0. You can see how now everything's up against the edge. We're gonna take our H1 in our logo class, and we're gonna say font family is gonna be that Amari or Amari. All right, and then we're also gonna say font weight is normal. All right, so we can see down here, that's what that changed. Next up after that, we're gonna take our paragraph and all of our A tags or A elements. Font family is gonna be Montserrat here. All right, and then we're gonna take our unordered lists, of which there are several there, a couple at least, and we're gonna say list style is none, and a margin 0, padding 0. All right, next up after that, we're gonna take our 3 position absolute elements that are at the top of our HTML document, and also pagination, and we're gonna say position absolute. All right, so now you can see they're all scrunched up there because they're not positioned yet in and of themselves. Our social, we're gonna just display none that specifically, just because on a smaller phone, having the social links right there on the left just seemed too cluttered to me. We could still have the pagination to the right, but having them both at the same time would be a little bit too crunched in. So it would be just too cluttered. So now what we're gonna do after that is we'll specify our header. So we'll start working on the top section. So background will be white, even though it's white by default, but we are gonna have that photograph. And so if you look at the reference right here, you can see, technically this would be up here otherwise. So I want the background to be white up there. It's basically a white bar. We're gonna do display flex for our element inside, and then justify content will be space between. All right, and then we'll also put a padding of 1 em unit just to give it some white space. There we go. And then our unordered list inside will be display none. All right, so we just have our hamburger menu there. All right, after that, oh, by the way, I'm not gonna make the actual menu function for this because that's just gonna take unnecessary time for the purpose of this tutorial. So now we're gonna have main BG. We're gonna have our background. So this is that image right here, just as another quick reference, this section. So we're gonna have our images, main bg.jpg. And of course, right now, we're not gonna see it because we haven't defined width or height or anything. We're gonna put a width of 40%. And then we're also gonna do a height of 900 pixels. All right, and then we're also going to do a, let's see here, z-index of -1, because remember, it is position absolute from one of the above rule sets. And then also right will be 0. And I want to position the background a little bit. So we're going to do 40%, and this is horizontal and this is Y. Now we can see a little bit of that. Okay. Now, continuing on, we're going to have our main content. Our main content, I want to put some padding on. So our main content is the container for this and this, all right? So you can see it right here. So main content is going to be padding, and we're going to give it quite a bit. 9 em at the top, 4 em on the right, we'll put 9em on the bottom again, and then 3em on the left. All right. We're not there yet, of course, but we're starting to establish some. Oh, what am I doing here? Reset that. There we go. Now we're starting to establish some white space here at least. We're going to take our H1. We're going to say font size is going to be 2.5 em units. And then line height. Notice there's a lot of line height by default between these two elements. That doesn't look good. Let's go ahead and put that at 1em. There we go. Next up is going to be our paragraph inside of the main content. All right, so we're going to say here, font size, we're going to make it a little bit smaller, 0.9 em units. We're going to do a line height of 1.5 em units, just to space it out just a tad bit. We're going to do a padding left of 20%, because remember, we have an indentation, which is right here. So we're still maintaining that indentation even on the smaller mobile viewport here. And then we're going to use our and before here to create this little section right here, all right? So in order to do that, we're going to do content, empty, and then position will be absolute. Now remember, oh, actually, yeah, we don't have to put, you'll see how this works. I was going to put position relative here because I usually almost always do that when I do this sort of thing here, but I didn't do it here though. And we'll see why in a second. So we're going to do left 0. Height will be 2.5 em units. Width will be 20%. Background of that beige color happens to be this. All right, now we can see it. And then margin top, 0.3 em units, just to push it down just a tad bit. And that's all. That's all we have to do for that element. Now, of course, this really starts to break, but we'll fix that here with media queries. But now look, this is a pretty good representation of a mobile, adaptation of the desktop layout for this section at least. We're not done here though. So we still have some more because we have that big bluish block at the bottom. Let's see here. We'll take our footer. Width is going to be like 85%. Background will be 23383B. You can see it there. We're going to do display flex, and we will also do a position relative. In bottom will be 10% here. Actually, no. We'll take that bottom out. That won't work. Okay. I was screwing around with this earlier in my initial code base for this to make it a position absolute, but I don't think I didn't end up doing that. Now we're going to take our makeup div element right here, and that's going to have the background images of that makeup section. So height 8em, background will be URL, images, and makeup.jpg. Background size will be cover. And there it is. Now also, we'll take our call to action, which is .cta, and we're going to make it color white. You can see that right here. We'll say text decoration none. Margin, let's see. Oh, we're going to do align self. And that will be center. And then we will also do, let's see here, position relative, margin 3em auto, and white space will be no wrap. The reason I had a white space no wrap, if I try to get in here a smaller viewport width, it won't let me though. This browse beauty, the beauty part will wrap into a second line. I didn't want that to happen, so that's what it stops that from happening there. And then also we have this little element. It's like a border, but it doesn't go all the way out like a regular button. It's just kind of like a unique treatment on that traditional button outline. So because of that, we're going to use and before, And we'll say, again, the same two elements that I'm always using on the before and after pseudo element or pseudo selector is content and position absolute. And then also we'll do width. It's about 83% or so. We'll have a height of 3M units, and we're going to say left is going to be -1M units. The top will be -1. And the border is going to be a 1 pixel solid white. Just like that. So, of course, when I'm creating this code, when I was first creating it, I did it yesterday. I didn't know it was going to be exactly -1M unit. I just put them at 0 just to see what they look like by default, just to see where I was at. And I was like, okay, so this is clearly not correct. So we could use -1M on the top and left, and now it looks perfect. All right. And then finally, we have our pagination class. And then we'll be done with the mobile viewport because we're real close. We're just going to have that pagination section on here. So we'll say, by the way, is it pagination or pagination? I don't know. I never knew. All right. Z-index 1, because remember, it's already position absolute. We'll do background is going to be white because there is a white background behind all of those, as you can see here. And then also we'll do, right is going to be 0, and top will be 30%. All right. So right now we still can't see it. Let's do list items. All right. So our list item is going to be padding 1M on the top, 1.5M on the right, 1.5M on the bottom, and 1M from the left. Now we can start to see it right here. All right. So also this would be position relative. We're going to create those circles using that same before selector. So again, can I paste this? Yes, I can. We're going to say width 10 pixels, height 10 pixels, and border 1 pixel solid, RGB 145, 145, and 145. Now they're squares, border radius 50%, we'll make them circles. And then also, to make the currently on active and fill that in, we'll come outside of the list item and we'll say active, let's see, before background black, because we had an active class onto the very first list item. And there we go. All right, so that is almost it. It's not quite it because I'm noticing the logo, I left out one selector up here. The logo is not correct. I'm just going to paste that rule set in real quickly, and I will put this right here. There we go. There we go. So that's it. So this is, I would say, a pretty good adaptation of, the desktop design that I created for mobile right here. Now, of course, it starts to kind of break. It looks real ugly. So that's where our responsive design is going to come into place. So we'll create our first media query down here. And that media query will be at around 550 pixels, which is usually around, for most projects, where I put a media query. And it doesn't always have to be 550, but it seemed to work right around there. So when I say 550, if we hit Control-Shift-I to get our DevTools out, you can see up here, 550 is right around this area right here. And at this point, we have enough room to put out those forward links right here and to possibly make some other slight adjustments. So let's close that out. So what we'll do here is a good trick, if you use M units for like your white space in terms of margin padding, you can automatically scale all that up by changing the body's font size property. By default, browsers set that at 16 pixels. So if we bump it up to 18 pixels or so, you'll see automatically things will grow. So if I save this, you can see all of our white space has grown now. So you'll see it right here, right there is at 550. Okay, so after that, we'll have our menu. We're going to display none that. And then also our nav, let's see, our nav UL display flex. Now we can see all this ugly links up here. So let's fix that a bit. We'll take our LIA elements and we'll say color black. We will also text decoration none. We will display block. Now, when we put display block, nothing visually happens, but you need to put display block if you want to add padding onto your link elements. All right. And then font size, we'll make it a little bit smaller, 0.9 em units. There we go. Okay, next up, we'll take our social. Our social. So social, we're going to say display unset. Our social is now up here. Let me drag this in so we can see our changes right there. And we're going to do z index as 1. And we'll also put left 1.5 em units, get away from the side of the browser a bit. Top will be 30%. And also text align center will align those SVG image elements to the center right there. And then we'll take our list item inside of here. So social was a class on an unordered list. And we're going to say margin bottom 2 em units. We'll also put, let's see here. Our image, we'll reference our image and say width 20 pixels. Scale them down, they're a little bit big. And then we'll take our last child. These are all pretty much the same size except this big old Facebook graphic because it's not much width by default, so it's making it unnecessarily large. We'll say and last child and image. And then inside here we say width 10 pixels. All right, so there's not enough white space between this element and this H1, right? So we're going to adjust the padding on our main content wrapper. So main content, still 9 em units on the top, but we're going to do 4 em units here, 7 em, and then 6 em units there. So now we've pushed it away from that area. So just subtle changes as you can see when we go back and forth. And next up, we're going to take this element right here because it's a little bit too far away. We're going to bump that from 20% up to 25%, the width, just to get it a little bit closer. Okay. After that, let's create our little block elements because we have a little bit more room. So we could take our block. We're going to say position is absolute. Remember, the parent container footer is position relative already. We'll do background. It happens to be 335257, just slightly lighter. And then a width of 2 em and height of 2 em. All right, now it's right there. So what we need to do is we also had 1. So if we look at, we had 1 and then 2. So for the first one, we're going to put right 2 em units. And then we're going to put for the second one, which is 2, right is going to be 0, and then top is going to be 2 em units. Very easy. All right. So now we probably could have put this here, the default, CSS without media queries. We probably could have added it there as well. In fact, I think I might just do that. I'll take it out of there, put this at the bottom, and there we go. Yeah, there's no reason not to have that by default. So we're progressively enhancing the UI, as you can see. We're real simple. And then as we get out, we're making adjustments. So it's still looking good even right here. All right, so that was all for that media query. The next media query is going to happen at around 900 pixels, which probably is right around here. So let's take our media. And for this one, we'll take the body font size from 18 pixels in the previous media query to 20 pixels. So right there, this is where we're at. We can probably go ahead and drag this in now. And then what we'll do is our footer, we're gonna take the width, shrink it a bit from 85% to 75. So it brings it in. Also our makeup graphic, we could probably bump that up a notch. So width would be 12M, height is 12M. So I think before it was 8. So now we're bumping that up quite a bit. We're also gonna take our main content, adjust the padding there again, which the main content again is a wrapper on this element. And we're gonna say 7M, 4M, 7M, and 8M. All right, and then our paragraphs, or paragraph inside of it, width will be 50%. All right, and that is it for that media query. So going from here, here, here so far. And then finally, we only have one more media query for this. That's going to be 1200. And that will be body, font size, 22 pixels. So 1200 is out quite a bit further here, right there. We'll do main content. Again, we're gonna adjust the padding here. This time I think I will just save myself some typing. It's gonna be 7, 4, 7, 10. All right, and then also our paragraph width will be 30% here. All right, so that is it. So we could probably make even further adjustments to this as we go out. Definitely would want to. Probably bump up the size of the font, the body selector's font size property when we even go out to like 1400 or so, in order to maintain this sort of layout, like right here where we're dealing with this. There's several ways you could do that, or you could even take the width of this element, which was, I think, main BG, or we could position it a little bit away from this section. So let me just do that. I didn't create the code for this yet, but let's just see. We'll just say 1400 right here. And then we'll take our main BG, which is, where are we at? Main BG, there we go. Like this selector, we'll bring it down here. We have right 0, so what we could do is right 10%. So now we're able to maintain that sort of section over here. And what we could probably do, probably even at 1400 pixels right here, we could kind of, when it comes to a lot of layouts, if you get real large like this, it's kind of hard to follow when everything is all the way out to the left and all the way out to the right. We could probably bring things in away from the edge of the browser more, and kind of create a container inside. That would probably be worth doing here. But I'll let you guys, if you wanted to, do that on your own. So to a large extent, we've done exactly what we wanted to do, which is to take this design here, which a lot of you thought would be real complex to pull off, and it's not. And we've created the front-end development process of making this work pretty much almost exactly the same as in the mockup. All right, guys, if you enjoyed that, let me know in the comments. Also, give me a subscribe with the bell notification icon turned on. I'm doing this all the time. There's probably 3 new videos, usually 2 to 3 new videos per week where I'm teaching UI, UX design, front-end development. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.